All right. So, guys, we are living through. We've been living in sort of really historical, almost biblical times for a few years, because the geopolitical events that have been unfolding before our eyes have truly been remarkable, historical, and like I said before, almost biblical. Um, and and it the events continue to astonish. There's really no other word for it, just astonish, astound. And today's topic, I think, is, for me, um, very difficult, very bitter, but we need to be honest about what's going on, and you can't sit back and cheerlead when things have taken a bad turn. So today's topic is Winston Churchill or Neville Chamberlain. The early read isn't good. We now have confirmed details of the Memorandum of Understanding, which Trump often frequently refers to as the deal. These details, the MOU itself has been published by Bloomberg News. So we do have all the details now, so we can no longer claim we don't really know what's in the deal. We do know what's in the deal, or at least the memorandum of understanding. And it is crystal clear that this is a capitulation to Iran. In other words, somewhat of a surrender to Iran. And it's clear by going through line item by line item, there's 14 points to the Memorandum of Understanding. It's very clear Trump's priority is to exit the war, to look for an off ramp, and he doesn't care about further weakening the Iranian regime. In fact, he's perfectly happy to strengthen the Iranian regime, to pay them off, to buy them off, if it can mean he can get an exit. The architects of this deal are clearly J.D. Vance, Jared Kushner in particular. I can see his fingerprints all over these ideas. And of course, Steve Witkoff, who has been the lead negotiator with Iran since day one. Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, and CIA Director John Radcliffe were opposed to this deal for good reason. And I'm going to just give you some of the highlights. You've probably seen it yourself, but I think it's worthwhile just reviewing some of the highlights. First of all, opening the Strait of Hormuz so oil can begin flowing again is important to Trump, of course. And in return for opening the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranians are going to get some upfront relief on some of their frozen assets. In fact, there's pretty strong reporting now that Iran has already received multiple billions of dollars just to sign the memorandum of understanding. So some frozen assets have already been released, giving them access to at least 3 billion, probably more. And then once the deal is signed, there will be more sanction relief. There will be sanction relief, particularly on Iranian oil. So they'll start to get revenues right off the bat. And then down the line, there's the potential for a $300 billion investment fund in Iran. Now, Vance and Trump have both said that, yeah, but that's not US tax dollars. That's sort of besides the point. You're going to be enriching this Iranian regime, giving it access to all kinds of resources. And these are actually larger amounts of money that's being thrown at Iran than Obama or Biden ever threw at Iran. So when people say this is a JCPOA repeat, this is one of the things that they have in mind. All the cash being thrown at Iran is very, very significant. And what does the United States get in return? Well, honestly, not very much. There's nothing in this Memorandum of Understanding that touches Iran's ballistic missile program. There's nothing that touches their funding of their proxy terror network, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. They're free to continue to fund that terrorist network. And in fact, it actually tries to tie Israel's hands in striking Hezbollah in Lebanon. So that's obviously a particular problem with this deal that we're going to touch on, get into more depth later on in this discussion. And on the nuclear weapons program, it does explicitly say that no nuclear weapons for Iran, but it seems to leave open the possibility that Iran can enrich a minimal level of uranium as long as it's not for nuclear weapons. But even if they're able to enrich a little bit of uranium, that gives them a clear path towards a nuclear bomb. Once Trump is gone, or even while Trump is in office, if the Iranians think he doesn't have the appetite for war anymore, they are going to start ramping up enrichment immediately. So this is, this deal is weaker, I think, than anyone could have possibly anticipated. Now, what's the philosophy behind this Memorandum of Understanding? Well, the idea is if you comply with this deal, we are going to welcome you with open arms into the world of nations. You can be a normal country. The world will invest hundreds of billions of dollars into your economy, and you can thrive and become a preeminent power in the Middle East, if not in the entire world. All you have to do is behave normal. That's it. Just behave. And if not, the threat is we're going to isolate you again. Now, there's nothing really in this deal that's very scary that lets Iran know you're going to be isolated. We're going to wage war on you. There's no credible threat here. There's no really, baseball bat that threatens them. We're going to whack you over the head and beat your brains out if you don't comply. So mostly what this deal is a huge reward if you comply. And if you don't comply, well, you know what? Maybe we'll hit you, but, maybe not, right? There's nothing in here that's terribly scary. Now, how is it that Trump went from clobbering Iran from February 28th all the way through April 7th, and then does this massive about face and is now throwing the offers of huge amounts of cash at them? Well, this is where it gets to Jared Kushner having his fingerprints all over this deal, and I think being the architect of everything. Jared Kushner is someone who believes that all you have to do is offer economic opportunity to people, and they will moderate. Kushner believes that everybody wants a good, secure life for themselves, for their wives, for their children. Now, when Islamists, radical Islamists, look at these types of offers, what do they think? It confirms their view that the United States is weak, that it's pathetic, and they're disgusted at the United States by thinking that the U.S. can just buy them off with money. They are revolted by these financial goals that we put up on a pedestal. And Trump right now is making the exact same mistake that Biden made, that Obama made, and that many presidents before them made. Many U.S. administrations have believed that we can just buy them off. If we pay them enough money, if we give them enough economic incentives, the radical Islamists will moderate and say, yeah, we too want financial gain. We want opportunity. We just want to raise our children the way you raise your children in the West. but that is hopelessly naive. And it's going to get the Trump administration exactly what it got Obama and other presidents. It is going to buy them more radicalism, more jihadism, more war, more dead civilized human beings. That's what it's going to get them. It hasn't worked in the past. It's certainly not going to work today. So what happened to Trump? We see who's the architect of this, but why now? Why is Trump buying into these failed ideas when he's been so critical of these failed ideas before, right? He slammed Obama over and over and over again, right, for making a bad deal and being hopelessly naive. Why the shift? Why wasn't he listening to people like Vance and Kushner and Witkoff up until April 8th? Well, number one, Trump is not a deep thinker. He really doesn't know history. He knows sound bites, but he really doesn't have a framework for understanding the Middle East, for understanding Iran, for understanding radical ideologies. Trump really just looks for shiny objects, right? Shiny objects, I mean quick wins, quick victories that he can hold up as a big trophy. I did it again. But it turns out that he really thought that defeating Iran wouldn't be so different than ousting Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. Yes, for sure, he thought it would take a bit more time. It wouldn't take a few hours like it did with Maduro. It would probably take a few weeks. But it didn't work out that way. And he wasn't willing to take risks, right? After 2 American pilots were downed and rescued on April 4th, that is, I think, the pivotal moment where Trump really started to worry that this shiny object, this trophy, wasn't going to be so easy to win. And as we mentioned before, he certainly had memories of Jimmy Carter's failed rescue of American hostages in Iran in 1981, and that jarred him. And partly as a consequence of that, Trump never used military force to really open up the Strait of Hormuz, right? Because he worried about losses of American assets, military assets. He worried about losses of lives of American soldiers. So that was an important factor as well. He could have opened up the Strait of Hormuz with military force. He got cold feet. So Iran remained in control of the Strait of Hormuz. And then, of course, we have oil prices, right? Uncomfortably high oil prices that have been fueling higher inflation. And that made this war particularly unpopular ahead of midterm elections. So Trump decided, for all these reasons, he wanted out. And this was clearly an emotional response. It wasn't a thoughtful, strategic, long-term view, right? He just wanted out. He seemed to start to panic. Now, his own generals told him, and they said it in public, right? This is not a secret. The U.S. generals stood up in front of America and said, we need about 2 more weeks. And if we're given about 2 more weeks, we can take out all the remaining targets we need. And we will severely weaken the regime to the point where it becomes very vulnerable. And perhaps that would be the point where the Iranian people might be able to rise up. And again, we heard over and over again that Trump and Netanyahu would pick the moment to call the Iranian people into the streets, right? It seems like a long time ago, but it was just in the days of early April when that seemed to be the strategy. But after April 4th, it seems like Trump backed off that strategy and had a change in heart. And beginning with the ceasefire, it appears that Trump began listening to those voices who were anti-war. And it's not surprising. Once Trump decided he wanted out, he's looking for confirmation that getting out is probably a good idea. So he starts talking to the anti-war crowd. And these people tend to be very isolationist, and they also tend to not like Israel very much. And we begin to see Trump's thought process shift pretty dramatically. And his language begins to shift. And really, in the last few days, his language has become rather shocking. And we're going to talk about his language in just a minute. But the question is, what does this shift mean for the United States and for the entire world? Well, let's be clear. I said it once, I'll say it again. The United States of America caved into Iran. And the message it's sending to our enemies and to our allies is that the United States is not willing to defend its basic interests. And we now need to get permission from Iran to use the Strait of Hormuz, the key international waterway where oil flows through from Middle Eastern countries into Europe. We need to ask Iran's permission because they will continue to control the Strait of Hormuz. America caving in, asking permission from Iran, is a key message that we're sending to the bad actors in the world. So the question is, who else in the world is now going to seek to take advantage of U.S. weakness and extract payoffs from the United States, just like Iran is now extracting payoffs in the United States? And it seems to be clear now that all you need is some stamina to endure pain for longer than the United States can endure pain. And that's not that hard because the United States was only able to endure pain for 38 days, and then Trump called ceasefire, right? The U.S. clearly has very limited stamina. Unless we can deliver a knockout blow in the first few weeks of a confrontation, we're the ones who wave the white flag. And the world, when they look at the United States today, they see a weak society with no pain tolerance, with no endurance, with no toughness. And this confirms what countries like Iran thought all along, what countries like China thought all along, which countries like Russia thought all along, which countries like North Korea thought all along. The United States is a spoiled, materialistic country with no pain tolerance, with no endurance. What else is the world learning about the United States? The United States abandoned the Iranian people. Trump said help is on the way. Well, help is not on the way after all. The lesson is you cannot trust the United States. He's recognized this evil Iranian regime as the rightful controller of the people of Iran. It's also the rightful controller of this terrorist network. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis were abdicating responsibility and saying, Iran, it's yours. Just like it has always been, it continues to be. And now, in recent days, it appears Trump is abandoning its model ally. And why do I use the term model ally? Because this is the term that the United States government used when it published its national security document on January 26th. It named one country in the entire world as the model ally of the United States, and that country was Israel. Well, what's the implication of Trump turning its back on its model ally? Well, In that national security document published in January, when the United States called Israel its model ally, the message to the rest of the world was, you should be like Israel. You should be reliable. You should be dependable. You should be culturally strong, proud of who you are, proud of your heritage. You should build up your military capacity. You should become economically excellent, because this is what Israel has done in a very short time period. This is a young country, and in no time, this tiny country has become the model ally of the United States. So what's the message to the rest of the world? Well, for a few weeks, we worked hand in hand with our model ally. But once the going got tough, that was it. We say goodbye to our model ally, and we start giving handouts to the greatest enemy of our model ally. Now, by the way, since February 28th until April 8th, when the ceasefire was declared, the model ally, Israel, exceeded U.S. expectations by a country mile. Every member of the U.S. Air Force and every general involved in this war is well aware that Israel performed spectacularly well, well beyond our wildest imagination. Their military sophistication, their intelligence capabilities, the bravery, the skill. No Air Force in the world, including the U.S. Air Force, I should say, and this is like, who would say this, right? But it's known, were any U.S. pilot shot down, Israeli pilot shot down? No. We had several American pilots shot down. It's not that America was doing more dangerous missions than the Israeli Air Force. The Israeli Air Force happens to be a little bit more skilled than the American Air Force. And it's no wonder, because they have a lot more real life experience fighting wars constantly. But now Trump is talking badly about the Prime Minister of Israel. And again, I'm going to get more into that soon. But Trump is doing all the wrong things now. He had been doing all the right things. And like that, in the blink of an eye, he collapses and he's doing all the wrong things that you can imagine. Why would any country now want to be an ally of the United States if they throw their model ally under the bus? Well, it's clear that Trump cannot think in long-term or even medium-term or even short-term coherent strategic terms, right? He cut and ran after 38 days. So that's not even short-term, right? That's microsecond in terms of wars. He has no, even again, he has no short-term strategic vision. He's always chasing the next shiny object. He is like a president with ADD. He has no long-term vision, no in-depth knowledge, no patience to see through a difficult moment, right? He can't see difficult moments through to the end. When his generals asked for 2 more weeks, he just couldn't do it. He couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't take the higher oil prices. He couldn't take the criticism by the media. Now, Trump had very good instincts. In his first administration, he moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, the first country in the world to do that. Then he went on to sign the Abraham Accords. He opposed Obama's terrible policies in the Middle East, especially the JCPOA, the deal with Iran, which gave Iran billions of dollars to fund their terrorist network and their military and their nuclear program. But now, as I said, the amount of money that Trump seems to be offering Iran surpasses the amount of money Obama threw at Iran. Okay, that's how bad this is. And again, this goes back to Kushner. His ideas that if you throw a big enough bribe, if you give enough monetary and economic enticements, you can bribe them into behaving. But we know from history, when you try to bribe dangerous, revolutionary Islamists, they only become more dangerous as the money comes in because you're just helping them finance their Islamist theocratic ambitions. Now, this sounds pretty dire, and it is, but I also believe that all may not necessarily be lost. Maybe he'll wake up. Trump has a big ego. And perhaps when he understands that the entire world knows that he is capitulating, there's a chance that he'll snap out of this, right? When he gets called Neville Chamberlain too many times, that Trump is appeasing, just like Obama appeased, maybe this will hit his ego so hard that he won't be able to go through with it. Also, there's the possibility that Iran overplays its hand, right? That Iran ends up seeing that Trump is capitulating. So they push and push and push, and they ask for more and more and more. After all, we know that they want to humiliate Trump. They want to humiliate J.D. Vance. So they may keep pushing it and making Trump look weaker and weaker and weaker. And at some point, Trump may say enough. So there is still that possibility. And you never know with Trump, because one day he's minutes away from bombing Iran, and the next day he's signing a peace deal. So Trump can turn on a dime. So that's still a possibility. Now, who loses most from Trump's capitulation? Well, I think from a reputational standpoint, it's clearly the United States, because the United States has now been outed, right? We had this image, or at least we wanted to have this image, of the mighty United States with this incredibly powerful and sophisticated military. But as the Islamists and the Chinese and the Russians have always said, we revealed ourselves. We outed ourselves as a soft society. So our reputation is badly, badly burned by this. Massive, massive reputational costs, right? We are untrustworthy to our allies, right? We're a bad friend. And Trump, who was thought to be the fiercest, the most unpredictable, the craziest, the madman in the White House, he capitulated to Iran. So everyone looks at the United States and they think after Trump, we're only going to get weaker from here. Because if it's J.D. Vance or any Democrat, the United States will completely vacate the international space to China, to Russia, to Iran, right? That is the view certainly here from the Middle East, and in all likelihood from the entire world. So who else does this hurt? Well, it's obviously an enormous blow to the Iranian people, right? They were told, as we said earlier, help is on the way. And now they've been abandoned. So when's the next time they are going to have the courage to take to the streets and get slaughtered the way they did back in January? I think any hope of that has been, I don't want to say it's gone forever, but it has definitely been delayed, pushed back, postponed for quite a long period of time. Well, what about Israel? They seem to be probably very badly hurt. Well, I'm here, and I have been listening to many Israeli geopolitical analysts and high-level military strategists, and this is what I'm hearing. A lot of Israel's achievements will be maintained, but a lot will also be lost. So if you compare Israel to October 6th, 2023, that was the day before Hamas broke through Israel borders, slaughtered, 1,200 Jews, took over 250 hostages. So if you compare Israel to October 7th, the day before that event, that horrific event happened, Israel, up until a few days ago, was probably 90% better off than they were on October 6th. Why? Because while Hamas is still alive, they've been devastated. While Hezbollah is still alive, they've been severely weakened. And Iran was mostly neutered, right? We've talked about that at length. But now, so Israel was 90% better off from a security standpoint, from a military standpoint. They were clearly the only major military power in the Middle East, and that made them far more secure. But with this deal, if it progresses, and if Trump enriches Iran the way the MOU anticipates that it will, then Israel is going to be expected to lose somewhere between 20 to 25% of those gains. So they'll be 65 to 70% better off than they were on October 6th of 2023. So that's still a significant improvement. And those achievements would have been completely consolidated and actually, improved. So Israel would have gotten to 100% better off had Trump seen it through and allowed those generals to finish the job and then begin to encourage the Iranian people to take to the streets, right? The Middle East truly, truly could have been transformed, and that opportunity has been missed. So now, for Israel, the situation has become more urgent, and it will need to become completely militarily independent from the United States. They're going to need to manufacture all of their military assets in Israel. They can no longer rely on the United States. They cannot be in a position where the President of the United States can tell Israel, like Trump is telling Israel today, you cannot defend yourself from Hezbollah. Because if you defend yourself from Hezbollah and you fire missiles into Lebanon, you're going to blow up my deal, right? That's what Trump is saying right now. That is not a viable situation for the Israeli government or the Israeli people. So the only way you can eliminate that risk is by becoming entirely militarily independent. Now, this is something that Bibi wanted to do, and he announced it a couple of weeks ago. They were on a 10-year project to achieve that goal. Now they're going to have to put the pedal to the metal and get that done far faster. Now, we're going to continue with this theme in a bit about more on Israel and how this affects them and what they've learned. But I want to talk a bit about the impact of Trump's capitulation to Iran on the Middle East in general. So Iran now believes it can stop Israel from striking Hezbollah by complaining to Trump. And it seems to be set in stone, according to the Memorandum of Understanding, that if Israel reacts to Hezbollah, right, Trump gets very angry at Israel. We've seen this a few times in recent days. In fact, a couple of days ago, Trump, after missiles were launched into Israel, Trump used these words. It wasn't a bad missile. Nobody got hurt. Okay, that's a quote from the president. Now, that language appears to be catastrophic, right? Israel has lost key support from the United States. And the question is, can Israel succeed without the support of the United States? It gets worse, right? Trump's language gets even worse. Just yesterday, at a G7 conference in Europe, Trump said, Israel has been fighting Hezbollah too long, and too many people are being killed, right? This is a quote. And then he said, you don't have to knock down an apartment house every time you're looking for somebody. There are a lot of people in those apartment houses, and they're not all Hezbollah. And then when he referred to Israel striking a suburb of Beirut where the Hezbollah stronghold is located, Trump said, I did not like that. And I let them know. And I let them know. And then he said, Bibi has to be more responsible with respect to Lebanon. So let's be clear. Every word Trump said about Israel striking Hezbollah in Lebanon is a complete lie. He sounds like Tucker Carlson. Israel does not knock down buildings where there's innocent civilians. In fact, there are 0 reported deaths of innocent civilians being killed in the round of fighting against Hezbollah in this recent round that began since February 8th. Israel has been incredibly targeted, incredibly precise. They have warned the civilians of Lebanon to get out of these areas, and the Lebanese, unlike in Gaza, they have complied. So Trump is just making stuff up, or more likely, he's speaking to people who are, they despise Israel, so they're feeding Trump with lies, and he's repeating them. This is incredibly, incredibly damaging, right? So he is attempting to take away Israel's ability to defend itself. And Hezbollah represents an existential threat to Israel. Existential meaning they threaten Israel's very existence. And you're telling Israel, don't respond because you're going to mess up my deal with Iran. But here's the thing, Hezbollah is Iran. It's just an instrument of Iran. So Iran continues to attack Israel through Hezbollah. But Israel's not allowed to respond. What kind of sick game is this? Even before this, by the way, and this is something that everyone closed their eyes to, but Israel was stopped by Trump from hitting Hamas in Gaza because Trump had this fantasy that Hamas would voluntarily demilitarize, right? Again, if you offer them enough economic enticements, if you say we're going to build the Riviera in Gaza, then all of a sudden the Gazan people who are terrorists are going to turn into civilized, humane people who care about their children, who want them to get good educations and get good jobs. We're talking about a completely different culture. Those things are not on their radar, and they never will be. They're driven by Islamist ideology that wants to kill Jews, that wants to kill Christians, that wants to take over the world. First the Middle East and then the world. And economic enticements do not change them. We have a long history to know that economic enticements do not change their thinking, do not change their behavior. So how will Israel react to these abrupt changes from Trump? So Israel, I'm pretty sure from, again, listening to a lot of people here, a lot of experts here, from within the military, outside of the military, Israel will not be stopped from responding to Hezbollah. Because if Israel were to follow Trump's orders, the results would be catastrophic. Currently, the entire north of Israel, the whole northern part of Israel, which represents 20% of Israeli territory and 20% of the Israeli population, this area has been under constant attack, and people have either abandoned their homes or they're spending a good portion of their days running to bomb shelters. This is completely unacceptable. And Israel cannot afford to not respond to these attacks. That will be true defeat. So Israel will respond. They absolutely will respond. Furthermore, since October 7th of 2023, Israel learned that it has to be preemptive. Preemptive means you cannot wait until you're hit, right? Because your enemy can build up so much firepower, and then they finally strike, they can overwhelm all your defense systems. So Israel has to preempt that. When they see their enemy building up, they have to hit them before the enemy gets too powerful. So Israel must be preemptive. They must weaken Hezbollah as much as possible, always, right? This has to be a constant preemptive strategy. Never allowing Hezbollah to get strong enough to do very serious damage. They've done enough damage, right? The entire north is under attack. And Israel will not sit on the sidelines and watch Iran rebuild Hezbollah so it can attack Israel in the future with far greater lethality. It will not happen no matter what Trump threatens. So the question is, will Trump really try to break Israel? Will he cut off their arms shipments now and say no? Because when the national security document that I mentioned earlier called Israel a model ally, it's because it is a model ally. Israel is the only country, the only friend in the world that the United States has that has the ability to protect and defend U.S. interests in the world. It's the only reliable ally. It's the only loyal ally. And it gives the United States the ability to reduce its military resources in the Middle East and then turn the Middle East over to Israel to protect U.S. interests so that the U.S. can then focus more on China. That's the United States' ultimate goal here. But if there's no Israel, if Trump really breaks Israel, there is zero chance of this happening. There is no other ally that the United States has in the Middle East that it can trust, right? And therefore, the United States would have to retain a huge presence here. And that would prevent them from focusing on China. So is Trump going to actually break Israel? Again, that would be an incredibly self-destructive move. Now, Israel today is even a better model ally than it was when that national security document was written. That national security document was written back in January when Iran was quite strong. Iran is much more vulnerable now. So Israel is far more powerful, far more capable of defending U.S. interests than ever before in history. So again, if it didn't make sense in January for Trump to break Israel, it makes even less sense now. Now, going back to Israel, it will insist on maintaining its ability and willingness to launch preemptive strikes. Why? Because it wants to survive. It has no other choice. Sometimes you'll hear political analysts say that Bibi is striking Hezbollah for electoral purposes, right? That Trump is telling them, no, don't do it. He's showing the Israeli population, see, I can even stand up to Trump, and he's doing it for electoral purposes. This is utter nonsense, right? Bibi has no choice. If he doesn't stand up to Trump and defend Israel against Hezbollah, Israeli citizens will be slaughtered. Any leader of Israel, whether they're from the left, from the center, or the right, they will defend Israel preemptively, and all Israelis see it the same way. It doesn't matter who would be prime minister. Any Israeli prime minister would launch preemptive strikes against Hamas, no matter what the President of the United States says. Now, this wouldn't be the first time that Israeli governments have had to stand up to US presidents, to hostile US presidents. In fact, if you go back to 1981, Israel told Ronald Reagan, President Ronald Reagan, that they were going to attack and put an end to Saddam Hussein's nuclear program in Iraq. And Reagan warned him not to. He said, I do not want you striking Iraq. It's going to cause me problems. But for Israel, Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq, having nuclear capabilities, again, that represented an existential crisis to Israel, a crisis of their existence. So they ignored President Reagan and they struck and they destroyed the Iraqi nuclear program. And what happened? Reagan lashed out. He imposed military sanctions on Israel. He stopped sending them F-16 fighter jets, and Israel was willing to pay the price. But within a few years, it was very clear that the United States was grateful to Israel for stopping Saddam Hussein and Iraq from going nuclear. In 2007, Israel did it again. They struck Syria's nuclear reactor, and they prevented Syria from going nuclear. Can you imagine Syria having nuclear weapons? Well, if it weren't for Israel, they would have. And why did Israel do that? Because at the time, President Bush refused to do it. So Israel did the dirty work for the United States and took care of it. This time, no sanctions were imposed, but the United States really didn't publicly thank Israel. But Israel's strategic importance to the United States was crystal clear. Now, I want to just draw a comparison between Israel, the European Union, and the United States. And why am I doing this? Because US, the European Union, and Israel really together represent Western civilization. So this small country of only 10 million people, it's a country no larger than, the territory is no larger than New Jersey or Rhode Island. It's the only nation in Western civilization that's willing to fight and defeat the barbarians to defend themselves, right? The Israelis are the only people. The European Union, they won't man the tanks. Until recently, they wouldn't even spend money on their military. Now Germany is finally spending on the military for the first time since the end of World War II. But guess what? They have nobody to man the tanks. Germans won't sign up for the army. So the Europeans are both militarily incapable and unwilling. They are weak. They are weak militarily. They will not fight for themselves. They think the Americans are going to come rescue them if necessary. Well, what about the United States? Well, Americans have been rejecting what Trump has been doing in Iran. And that's the major reason why Trump ended up capitulating, because he believed he was going against the popular will. He was looking at the polls. His popularity was sinking. He was reading the media who were constantly criticizing him. So he capitulated because the American people had no pain tolerance. So despite the fact that the United States has tremendous military capability, we as a people are unwilling to use our military power to win difficult wars. And Iran wasn't even so difficult. Imagine going up against China. Imagine going up against Russia, right? We gave up when Iran couldn't even hurt us, right? We had 13 servicemen who were killed tragically. 13. In a war, I'm sorry, that doesn't, it's not even statistically significant. From a human standpoint, it's tragic. From a military statistics standpoint, it doesn't even show up on the map. We have no tolerance for pain. Therefore, the country with the strongest military in the world is strategically weak. On the other hand, Israel is small but powerful. Because the Israelis don't have a choice, because the threat is immediate. If they don't fight, they won't exist. The Europeans, the threat is within their borders, and they're living in this fantasy land, and they are self-destructing, and they don't even know it, and they're not willing to do anything about it. And they think if they're attacked from outside, the US will protect them. But we just saw the United States isn't going to fight very long for anybody. Not even when it comes to its own vital interests, its closest ally, its model ally. Americans, we've lived too far away from conflict, so we don't understand danger. We think we can withdraw and nothing will affect us. And therefore, we won't fight even when very important issues are at stake. Why? Well, we won't fight, some of us, because we don't like Donald Trump, and anything he does, we oppose. Others, because we say it's not our business. We don't want to get in long, protracted foreign wars. It's not our business. We'll just hunker down at home. But it's Israel, tiny little Israel, who has the willingness and the ability to fight, and that's what has kept them alive, and that's what will keep them alive. So, implications for others in the Middle East. Well, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, there now is a very big risk. I think the Saudis and the Kuwaitis, 100% for sure, they're going to start to appease Iran, right? They're going to start to send them money, right? They will placate them, do anything because they don't want to. They don't want to get on Iran's bad. They are on Iran's bad side. Now they want to make up for it. The UAE, which had really moved into the camp of the United States. Remember, we talked about them breaking away from OPEC, cooperating more and more with the United States. Are they now going to capitulate as well? I think there's a very high risk. The answer to that question is yes. You got to pay off the bully. If no one's going to protect you from the bully, then you pay off the bully. Iran's hegemony in the Middle East was almost broken. The United States and Israel had their boot on the neck of the Iranian regime, and we took it off. And Trump, the scariest president, at least since Ronald Reagan, he backed down. And this is a very dangerous signal. It's one thing for Joe Biden to pull out of Afghanistan. It's a totally different thing for Trump to back down. It's much worse because there's nobody else left. So if Iran recuperates economically, and gets all this money thrown at them, and they start to invest in their military. They start to refinance Hezbollah and the Hamas and Houthis, and you end up with President Vance or a Democratic president. It's going to get much worse. And Israel is going to have to defend the world. That's where we are. This tiny little country is going to have to defend the world. By defending itself, it defends the world. Now, maybe, just maybe, there's an outside chance that Trump will come to his senses, as we talked about earlier. His ego, or maybe there is an overreaction, and Iran acts for too much, and Trump wakes up and he snaps out of this horrendous situation that he's put himself, the United States, and the world in. So that's where we are. That's where we are. Now, let me just say Israel has survived under a long list of unfriendly U.S. presidents. President Eisenhower was not a friend to Israel. Carter was horrendous. Obama was horrendous. And now Trump has taken this very negative turn. But over time, Israel has managed to get stronger and stronger. And its enemies, over time, have become weaker and weaker. And right now, its enemies are at their weakest. Trump is about to revive them, but they are at their weakest right now. But they're also encouraged. Their spirits have been lifted by the president. So I want to make one other point about these negotiations before we wrap up. I didn't really see it at the time, but now I'm reflecting on it. And I see that Trump was defeated before these negotiations even started. Iran said, we're not going to negotiate the nuclear question up front. We're never going to discuss our ballistic missiles. We're never going to discuss our proxies. We're only willing to discuss the Strait of Hormuz. And Trump said, okay, let's talk. So right from the beginning, Trump accepted their terms for negotiating. So step one, he capitulated right off the bat. He took off the table all of the most important issues. Iran wanted them off the table. He said, fine, let's just deal with the Strait of Hormuz. He capitulated right from the get-go. So he lost before they even started talking. So we have only one chance or two chances of hope. Either Trump realizes that he's losing and his ego gets the best of him, because Trump has a real sense of who is a winner and who's a loser. And if he gets called a loser enough times, maybe it hurts him and he wakes up from this self-delusion. Or maybe Iran overplays its hand. But if he doesn't wake up, we now are living with the very real perception that the United States of America cannot win wars, right? Just like the European Union cannot win wars, the United States risks following in those footsteps. We can't win wars because we can't sacrifice. We cannot put up with the pain, the struggle, the difficulty. It's not a matter of capacity. We have the military capacity, but we don't have the willingness. The Middle East looks at America, the world looks at America, and they say, America, you lost to Iran. You surrendered. That's how every country in the world sees it. Does Trump realize this? Does Trump want to go down as Neville Chamberlain, the loser, the appeaser, the accommodator who gave in to evil? Unfortunately, Trump is not a student of history. If he were, maybe he'd realize that right now he is following the footsteps of one of the weakest and most disrespected Democratic leaders in history, Neville Chamberlain. Trump, please wake up for the good of America, for the good of Israel, for the good of your model ally, and for the good of the world. Please wake up. Okay, everybody, I know that wasn't so easy to listen to, but I think it's important. Any questions?